WNEV TV, Boston. This is News 7, New England.
Good evening. Topping our 11 o'clock edition of News 7 tonight, GOP gubernatorial candidate Stephen Pierce is under fire for filing his state and federal income tax returns much later than the law allows.
News 7's Byron Barnett reports Pierce says he's embarrassed and claims he just didn't know that he was breaking both state and federal law. This could become a major campaign issue for him.
Phones were busy at Stephen Pierce for governor headquarters, many of the calls in response to the Republican candidate's tax returns. In releasing his returns today, Pierce revealed that his last 5 tax returns were filed late. His returns for 1984 were filed in May 1986. His returns for 1985, 86, and 87 were filed in January of 1989. And his 1988 tax returns were filed in December of 1989. Pierce says he thought he did not have to file because the government owed him a refund in each of those years. I acted on the advice of an accountant, said Pierce tonight. He told me it was all right to wait to reclaim the refund.
I think that Steve Pierce considers this to be a mistake. It's not something he would ever do again. But because it was a matter of getting money back from the government instead of having to give money to the government, it's simply something that he didn't do in a timely manner.
But a spokeswoman for the State Revenue Department said of Pierce's late filings, it's a clear violation of the Massachusetts state law. She said it's also a violation of federal law. And after examining Pierce's returns tonight, Harvard tax law professor Bernard Wolfman had this assessment.
Technically, if one willfully fails to file a return, one has committed a misdemeanor, could go to jail for a year and be fined $25,000 for each year. But I do not think that it would be held to be willful when he didn't owe any taxes and the government owed him taxes. So I don't think that it would be a misdemeanor in his case.
During the years in question, tax forms show Pierce and his wife, who's a registered nurse, earned between $52,000 and $85,000 a year. The staunch anti-tax Republican, who's campaigning to restore fiscal leadership, was recently challenged by his opponent, William Weld, during a Channel 7 mini-debate to release his tax return.
I filed them late because I had refunds coming, and I determined after talking with my accountant that since I'd paid all the taxes that were due, the refunds that were coming were mine, we could claim them whenever we wanted to.
Harvard tax law professor Bernard Wolfman called Pierce's actions foolish because he says he let the government keep so much of his money. As for how much political damage this will do is up to the voters to decide, of course. But Pierce's campaign manager says he thinks this will only be a small glitch. He says one thing is certain, however, that this year Pierce will file his tax returns on time. Maryanne?
Byron, thank you. And Pierce will make his next public appearance tomorrow at a Republican women's group in Lowell. Tonight, a nationwide recall of all Perrier products is underway following the discovery of some contaminated bottles in North Carolina. The Perrier Group of America says tests on a small sample of bottles showed the presence of the poisonous liquid benzene. Company officials say they don't know how the mineral water became contaminated and that no one has gotten sick because of the problem. The company says the recall is voluntary and that short-term consumption of the contaminated product would pose no significant health risk. R.D.?
The United States and the Soviet Union are very close to a major agreement on reducing troop levels in Europe tonight. The progress comes after lengthy talks in Moscow involving Mikhail Gorbachev, his foreign minister, Mr. Shevardnadze, and the U.S. Secretary of State, James Baker.
What we're shooting for, of course, is to conclude agreement on the major unresolved issues by the time of the June summit.
Gorbachev accepted a proposal by President Bush to reduce troop strength in Central Europe to 195,000 on both sides, but he rejected the U.S. plan to keep another 30,000 troops along NATO's other flanks. Gorbachev made it clear if the U.S. insists on extra troops, then the Soviets must also be allowed a total of 225,000 anywhere in Europe. Baker said he must discuss Gorbachev's counter-offer with America's NATO allies.
We indicated that that was a very interesting proposal. We noted with a great deal of interest that it was very, very close to the President's proposal.
Sources at the negotiations say they believe the U.S. and NATO allies will agree to Gorbachev's request for a 195,000 troop total on each side. The superpower talks today also brought agreement on a treaty to eliminate a large number of chemical weapons. Former President Ronald Reagan has agreed to answer questions about his role in the Iran-Contra affair, this for the upcoming trial of former National Security Advisor John Poindexter. Mr. Reagan is proposing that he give a videotaped deposition in Los Angeles next week. Mr. Reagan's lawyers say the former president recognizes that the court hearing Poindexter's case has a considerable responsibility to protect and preserve the rights of the defendant, as well as to be sensitive to the interests of the former president and the constitutional rights and duties of the presidency. However, Mr. Reagan says he will invoke executive privilege if necessary to avoid answering specific questions on matters of national security or diplomacy. Poindexter's trial is set to begin in Washington February 20th. Maryanne?
R.D., it appears tonight that the illegal drug business in Boston is now an equal opportunity employer. Boston police say more and more they are finding women engaged in street-level drug activity. And News 7's Miles O'Brien reports some are even doing it with babies in hand.
Drug detectives say alleged heroin dealer Robert McLean had a special relationship with his girlfriend, Andrea Bell, a business relationship. When they pulled the pair over on a recent night, a source had told police there was a lot of heroin inside the car.
You know, she was completely denying any involvement whatsoever. She didn't know anything.
But she apparently knew a lot. Investigators say she was carrying 50 bags of heroin. No surprise to police.
The money's there. The money's easy to make. Anyway, you know, little kids are doing this, so, I mean, it's not unusual to see a woman doing it.
And while police say it's not new, they say increasing numbers of women are becoming involved in street-level drug sales.
Man, they be out here rolling.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you suppose there are more of them doing it?
I don't know, man. I guess they want to be down with us, you know what I'm saying?
They're doing it because they have children, and, you know, this is quick, easy, fast money, and, you know, no taxes taken out.
In fact, in recent months, Boston police have seen a handful of cases where women have used their babies as props to deflect suspicion and as receptacles for their illicit stash.
The other thing is for safety purposes, while they're walking into these places to buy their drugs, fear of being robbed by other people, and the baby is a safety factor.
Women often utilize their anatomy to hide drugs and must be searched by a female police officer.
If we call for a female officer and there's none available, we're kind of like between a rock and a hard place. We may just have to let her go.
Has that happened?
Yes.
Not frequently, but police believe the impression it does is helping change the face of drug dealing. In Boston, Miles O'Brien, News 7.
Police say women arrested for concealing drugs are less likely to become repeat offenders. In a New York courtroom today,
we find him not guilty.
Reputed mob boss John Gotti innocent of conspiracy and assault charges. The jury clearing him and a co-defendant of taking part in the 1986 shooting of a Carpenters Union official. Out in the streets, the crowds cheered the news for the man known as Dapper Don and the godfather of the Gambino crime family. For 49-year-old John Gotti, this is the third time in 5 years that he has escaped conviction in a government case.
In South Africa, a violent end to a peaceful anti-apartheid rally in Johannesburg. About 1,000 people gathered outside a church to celebrate the legalization of the African National Congress. But police called on the crowd to disperse, saying the gathering was illegal. Then they charged, swinging riot sticks and rifle butts. Also today, about 2 dozen anti-apartheid leaders visited Nelson Mandela at his prison compound.
He is still a prisoner, and his release is a matter which is entirely in the government's hands.
While Mandela remains behind bars awaiting his promised release, the government today freed 2 white activists who were jailed for 8 years for helping the African National Congress. Maryanne?
R.D., a lot more to tell you about tonight here on News 7. We conclude our investigation of the state we're in.
I'm Hank Philippi Ryan. Tonight, the News 7 investigators look at remembrances of things past, government programs that refuse to die. That story coming up.
At the baseball owners meeting in Illinois, the talk is of lockout. John Dennis with details of what the owners and players are looking for. And how hot is Kathleen Turner, Debbie?
Well, she's very hot in Tennessee Williams' play, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof at the Schubert Theater. I'll have a review coming up. Lean on my shoulder?
I don't want to lean on your shoulder. I want my crutch.
Democratic gubernatorial candidate Evelyn Murphy is taking the heat tonight after taking the credit for breaking the state's budget logjam. Murphy claims the tax and savings proposal she unveiled on Wednesday is giving new momentum to the legislature to solve the crisis.
When you step in and you pull the log out of the jam, which is a very dangerous place to be, what you also get is a bunch of logs that are now starting to move in the same direction downstream. I think that's what's happening.
Although Frank Bellotti, a Democratic opponent of Murphy's, had no comment, her two other rivals were quick to criticize.
From what I understand, the proposal she's put forward to consolidate agencies to reduce administrative costs 10%, those were proposed by me and many other people over the last 2 years. And she never joined us. She never joined into this dialogue she says she's creating. Absolutely stone silent.
Must be some psychedelic experience that she's had. I find nothing in her budget proposal that bears any relationship to substantial progress with regard to balancing the budget.
Now, Murphy also said that she would not take part in a gubernatorial debate until she sees who the, quote, legitimate candidates are, a move her challengers say shows that she is afraid. R.D.?
Tonight, the state we're in. You often hear about new government programs beginning, but think about it. You rarely hear of one ending. Some of our state programs now are generations old, and tonight our News 7 investigators examine a few of those remnants of the past, remnants taxpayers are still paying for. Hank Philippi Ryan with the final part of her special series, the state's misspent years.
Go back 50 years, and this is about the only place you could go on Sunday. Back then, the state's blue laws banned dancing, drinking, even shopping on the Lord's Day, and the State Bureau of Sunday Entertainment made sure the law was kept. Go back 70 years when Massachusetts was a state of farms and country fairs, where a high-class animal or a high-yield harvest could reap a cash crop of prizes, courtesy of the state. But now Sundays have changed. It's a day to play as well as pray. Now high-tech is the crop driving our economy. But in room 1310 of the state's McCormick building, time stands still as a Sunday licensing agent works on, a remnant of the past, making sure Sunday concerts, Sunday movies, even Sunday boxing bouts are licensed. And nearby in the Salt and Stall building in the Agriculture Department still sits the Division of Fairs, still handing out hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash prizes at local fairs. Sunday entertainment, county fairs. Some say it's government in the past for a state moving to the future.
The fact is that some of these things, even if there was a clear rationale back a number of years ago, doesn't exist anymore. It's either stupidity or inertia. And I guess you can take your pick.
You might take your pick on the Executive Council, also known as the Governor's Council. Its 8 elected members meet here next door to the governor's office every Wednesday. The council was created in colonial times to keep an eye on a governor appointed by the king. But times have changed. Now governors are elected. And as for keeping a critical eye on him, an examination of council records shows it's given rubber stamp approval of all but one of Governor Dukakis's judiciary appointments. And our examination shows the council has, in 10 years, never stood in the way of Governor Dukakis's request for a prison pardon. As for its other jobs, like okaying state expenditures, critics say the legislature or others could do that.
I don't know that anybody would want them, and I suspect if we were drawing the charter of government for Massachusetts today all over again, we'd never even think to include the Governor's Council.
Yet the council remains a thorn in the side of taxpayers who have picked up the council's $500,000 tab over the past 5 years, and a thorn in the side of the governor, who now finds himself locked in battle with them over who will pay for a council stenographer. Members defend the council.
I will point out that we are a popularly elected body responsible not to a governor, but responsible to the people who elect us.
Not so popular. A check of 1988 voting records shows of all people who jammed the polls for the presidential election, almost 25% just left their ballots blank when it came to the governor's council. Some say Massachusetts is a 1990s state running on a 1790s system. Government programs take on lives of their own. Like souvenirs stuffed in a closet. No one really knows why they're there, but no one can get rid of them either. In just 4 years, 1984 to 88, total state spending in Massachusetts ballooned to $12.6 billion. That means government got bigger, too.
I could not name off the top of my head an agency that I felt